Hello and welcome to today's show. Joining me as my guests, first of all, Lori Richardson, a longtime friend, founder of Score More Sales, president of Women's Sales Pros, and author of a book recently. We've been talking about that book for a long time, Lori.
Yeah.
You got
Great.
it published, a great book called She Sells, and we're going to give you a chance to talk about that a little bit later. And then also joining us is Matt Benelli, co-founder of CoachEm. So yeah, we'll start with Lori. Lori, why don't you fill in that bio just a little bit? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. It's a pleasure to be here with you and Matt. I have been involved in selling my entire life and got into helping other companies to sell better and build better sales teams about 20 years ago, and have been self-employed ever since then, and launched Women's Sales Pros in 2015 when I walked into a room of almost 100 sales managers and directors of sales, and they were almost all men. And I just thought, is this the 80s? Because there aren't very many women in this room. There were maybe
Right.
4 women. And that's what caused me to start doing research about women in sales and getting more women into sales. And then ultimately the book.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit of the book. Don't skip over it.
Yeah. So the book is called She Sells: Attract, Retain, and Promote Great Women in B2B Sales. And it's a lot of answers. It's very tactical for those managers and leaders who do want more women on their sales team, who do want more diversity, but they're having trouble either in the hiring or the onboarding or the retention. And so we just answer lots of questions in the book, very hands-on.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, we're going to ask you a question about that just a little bit later. So Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Like Lori, I've been an operator in the space in sales for many years. We focus primarily on helping B2B and technology clients. I've served in all of the roles with SDR, frontline manager, director, VP, which means I've made every mistake in the book, probably more times than I care to admit. And then one of them was, and it's one of the reasons why I'm really looking forward to this discussion, is really trying to build a gender diverse team and really focusing on how to do that for the right reasons, but made all the mistakes along the way and accepted a lot of the excuses. So as a leader, as someone building teams, I want to read that book. And as I mentioned before we got started, I also am sharing it with my daughter who's just entering the workforce herself. So all of that, Andy and Lori, led me and a few others to co-found CoachEm, where we're focused on helping managers be better coaches, help them focus on coaching and developing their people to help them become the best versions of themselves individually and help the company achieve its goals as well.
Got it. And so is CoachEm in the market?
Is CoachEm in the market?
Yeah. You're selling to customers right now?
Yeah, we're selling to customers right now. If you know anybody, no, absolutely.
We do.
So we're a startup in the true sense of the word. We have our first several clients that we're working diligently to make sure that they're successful, so that they can tell the world. And we love having conversations about coaching.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think it's, long overdue to have something that's so focused specifically on frontline managers to help them become better, because I think all of us here, certainly on this panel and many people listening, understand just the incredible impact frontline managers have on the success of the people that work for them.
And the lack of training they often get.
And the lack of training they get, which is, shameful, I would say, in
Shameful.
20 words or less. Yeah, I like to say, look, if we spend, what I think LinkedIn's State of Sales a couple years ago says like $15 billion a year on sales training in the United States, of which, let's say, 5% of it maybe is spent on training frontline managers.
Yeah.
What would happen if we shifted those ratios and said, look, we're going to spend 95% of those $15 billion on enabling and training frontline managers and leadership in general, and we'll spend 5% on training salespeople? What would happen?
Great idea.
I think we'd be better off for it.
Yeah.
Well, we would be better off. Customers would be happier, longer term clients, which means more retention, less churn. Employees would stay at organizations longer, so they would be more productive. I know that's a important point for you, Andy, where you spend a lot of time talking about productivity.
Right.
A lot of good things will happen, and the data clearly supports it. The data clearly supports that a coaching organization, a organization that focuses on measuring the coaching behaviors of managers, does well longer term versus a more directive organization where the manager says, here's what you need to do, or worse, step out of the way. Let me show you how it's done.
I think we're seeing, right. We're seeing the impact of that though, right? As it becomes sort of this self-fulfilling cycle of events that happen as if you have managers that are undertrained. And because we know that frontline managers typically are themselves relatively inexperienced, even as salespeople, right? They could be the top salesperson or whomever, but they've been in sales for a relatively short period of time themselves. So they're uncertain even about really how to navigate throughout the entire sales process confidently. And then we throw them in these roles where they're responsible for developing other people. And I was promoted in my first sales manager job in 22 months, something like that. Here I was, 23 years old, managing 12 people. And sure, I just had 2 good years of sales under my belt, not even. And it's like, okay, now what do I do?
You got the battlefield promotion. Wow, you're great year, Andy. You're a tremendous salesperson.
Yeah.
Now you're a manager.
Oh, you're a manager. Yeah. And when I got promoted,
prayers.
there's supposed to be 2 sales managers. When I got promoted, the other sales manager was gone. I was like, okay, yeah.
That's people.
Yeah. But I look at that. I remember those first, until they brought another sales manager on, which took them a few months, but there's this period of like 3 or 4 months. I remember those as being the most stressful period in my career. It was just like, yeah, I did eventually get sent to training for it. I got 2 weeks of training. But yeah, I was like, because I felt responsible.
Yeah, that's why you were so stressed, because you cared, right?
Yeah.
You cared so much.
But now we take young people and they feel like they have to follow a recipe or a playbook. And it's like, no, it's all about the people.
Yeah.
So a question for you is, because this show is about sales effectiveness and win rates, is, so Matt, when you were carrying a bag, did you track your win rate?
Diligently, Andy, down to the hour. No, I did not. I did not track my win rate. I was told that you needed a 4X or 5X or 3X pipeline, and that we all needed to get that. But I also know that when I first started, I needed a hell of a lot more pipeline than the other folks who needed less pipeline to close the same amount of business. But I didn't know that until later. So that's a longer answer, but the short answer is hell no.
Hell no. Lori?
Well, on the other hand, I did track a lot of things. I tracked successful conversations, like way back when, compared to dials and connects, and I would do the whole thing. And I would track my win rate, generally speaking, but I did it for myself. And I worked for companies that had leaderboards and things like that, but they were pretty crude. So so I'd say not as well as you can do now. So a lot of great metrics that are available, a lot of great ways to track, better than I did.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate to have a boss who really emphasized it. It wasn't knowing the organization tracked it. He just said, I need to track it because this is what successful people do. You understand this is your most critical metric. But yeah, to your point, Lori, is given all the technologies available to track data these days, very few people are tracking their win rates. I have anecdotal evidence of talking to lots and lots, hundreds and hundreds of people in all sorts of organizations. People aren't tracking it. Yeah, we've been running some cohort-based coaching programs over the last 6 months, and I would say fewer than 10% of the sellers, many of whom are experienced, 10, 20-year sellers coming into it, know their win rate. And so if they don't know it, that means no one's asking them to know it. The managers aren't tracking it either.
Well, Andy, I'd be interested to what you and Lori think here, but one of the challenges that seems to get in the way for managers tracking it is to do that. You have to really have a 360-degree view into where salespeople are spending their time. And in order to do that, it comes across as, to many managers, especially newer managers, they don't want to be that micromanager. And that has a pejorative context
Mhm.
that many managers want to avoid. And while it is important, for some reason, it's got a bad rap.
I mean, Lori, the companies you work with as a consultant, are they tracking win rates?
Yeah, I would say so. That's why I'm curious what you mean by that, Matt, about micromanaging. Do you mean because opportunities come from a lot of different places, or are they not? Is there not a central place to track opportunities and ultimately closure of those opportunities?
So I guess if I went on to say that, what I mean is it's not being tracked at the individual level. And so where I see companies are tracking win rates all the time, every way till Sunday, but the specific win rate of rep A versus rep B versus rep C, and what is being done with that information, or how to coach and develop and coach up the folks who have the lower win rates to be more like those in the top decile. That type of focus I don't see happening as much as companies I think would benefit from.
Yeah, I think companies also what they're doing is they're looking, a little bit to your point, Matt, is they're looking at average win rates, but they're not looking at as, hey, what's our win rate by product or by segment or by deal size or deal length or any of the things that are really, for you really to understand sort of the composition of your revenue, you really should understand.
So important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can just love it's anecdotal, as I'll admit, but I have talked to a lot of people on the show over the years, and very few people know this. And it's sort of shocking to me because we've all become obsessed with our activity metrics and so on. But at the end of the day, the buyer ultimately has a vote about whether you win or not. And your win rate is the buyer's vote on how well a job you did.
Yeah.
So I would think that's something that should be top of list for people. And so I guess I'd ask the question, it's sort of one of the questions I'm asking all the guests that come on the show is, in your mind, and it's hard to generalize, I know, but my follow-up question, we'll get into the reason why I asked this, is what is an acceptable win rate for an AE?
Right.
Lori?
Wouldn't it depend? I'd love to give you a number, but
Well, tell us what you mean. Depend on what?
well, for me, progressing in my career and a lot of people I've seen, win rates get better over time, generally speaking.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
hopefully.
yeah.
Falls well. So a newer AE, it's not going to be as successful. Also,
Yeah,
whether
I'm assuming that past the learning curve. We're talking about people.
they're referred, they're higher. It could be a lot of different things, but I haven't seen a percentage. I know what we do, but it's different when you have more of a brand out there. But I don't know, Matt, do you have any idea?
Well, and before Matt
Right.
goes, just by way of context, is a really excellent book that was published within the last couple of years called Strikingly Different Selling, authored by Jennifer Colosimo and some
Really?
co-authors, all execs with Franklin Covey.
Right.
And they'd commissioned outside research on win rate, and they found that, oh gosh, thousands of companies were surveyed. I want to say 4,500, I could be off, across multiple industry segments, so not just tech. And they found that on deals 100K and higher, like 100K is relatively small deal these days,
Yeah.
100K and higher, win rate 17%,
Oh, wow.
average.
Wow. That's low.
In B2B. This is B2B across
B2B.
different industry segments. I forget exactly how many, but
So interesting.
so you look at that and say, well, gosh. And I referred to this in my last book, is when your win rates are so low, the buyers are making the decision to buy from you in spite of you, not because of you.
Yeah.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
that experience in general, what they're saying is the experience with sellers is so bad that, yeah, we need to make a change, but we're doing it not because of them, but because in spite of them.
Wow.
And yeah, I think that we've all grown up in the business where, having a 3x, a 4x, a 5x pipeline coverage would be an indicator of success. So if you have 5x coverage, that supports about, well, you just said a 17%.
20%. Yeah.
Yeah, your win rate's going to be the reciprocal of your pipeline coverage requirement. Rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And I just spoke with a potential client today, and they were talking about the need to improve their process. And part of it was in their CRM system. When they issued a quote, they called that at 50%. And so the follow-up question was, well, so if you issue a proposal or quote, how many of those do you win? And it was like a lot less than 50%. So it doesn't jive. So it also, I think, depends, when do you measure the win rate, from what point in the pipeline? Because a lot of what we see happening is the confusion of activity with results. And there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline that can give us a false sense of security. And we know if we have all these deals, we feel like we're working stuff, something's going to close. And I think that's where coaching, and that's where the leader, the manager, can come in to help provide some objectivity, to help put in that extra set of eyes and ears to say, hey, I know you're working really hard. This isn't a reflection on you, but do you really think this is a qualified opportunity that you and the rest of the team should be investing their time on? Instead, sometimes the manager's job's so hard that they're getting the happy ears too, and they're willing to work and throw resources at every opportunity. And it just perpetuates that low win rate that you're talking about, which creates a tremendous opportunity cost.
And if I could add, without doing that soon enough, the time cost is insurmountable, unbelievable in terms of wasted time when people are trying to nurture unqualified opportunities.
Oh, yeah. And to Matt's point about we sort of perpetuate these vicious cycles. Well, think about it, is it operates on, in my mind, multiple levels. So think about just from a marketing spend standpoint, right? If you're operating a low win rate environment, let's say it's 20%, you're putting a lot of stress on marketing to keep that pipeline full of activity, right? Of potential leads. But if you're managing to get your win rates up where they should be, we'll decide what that number could be later, is, even if you increase it to 30% or 35%, you need many fewer leads. But when you are in a low win rate environment, just think of the feedback that's getting fed back to marketing about the type of leads we need. It's not very good because you really don't have a good handle on it, because you're only winning in 1 of every 5. So again, that creates this vicious cycle where the feedback from sales to marketing really isn't that good. Whereas if you're winning a higher fraction of your deals, that intelligence you feed back to marketing about the type of opportunities you should be getting from them will be much more on point.
And what about this, Andy, where you start to realize, all right, if everyone understands what their personal win rate is, and then the manager works with each individual to improve that win rate from wherever it is. Now we're talking about consistent improvement. We're talking about personalized coaching. So we don't need a revolution, but if we could just evolve and get that proverbial 1% better every day, every week, every month, right? It's going to have a big impact on the organization.
Yeah. The knock-on effects, like I said, on marketing spend, on even staffing, right? Let's look at so many companies now, they decide to, well, if we're going to scale, we need to add these bodies, but you're adding these bodies into a process that's inherently ineffective. And so we should really be doing is focusing on, well, how do we learn how to sell the product we have, achieve a higher win rate? Then let's add people into that who can, because we now understand how to sell. Whereas I think most companies these days, oftentimes, especially when they're trying to scale quickly, is they don't know how to sell the product they have.
Yeah, I like, Matt, that you said personalized coaching as opposed to like pushing something at people, but actually doing it based on their success or lack of success and based on the traits that they need to focus on and the skills that they have.
Yeah, there was something I'd read this week on LinkedIn. Yeah, well-known thought leader, or let's say somebody with a relatively big following, talking about how the sales environment changed and we're through with the growth at all costs type stuff. And it saying for him his best advice and was if you're going to grow sales, is you got to get your best leads, give it to your best people, because the best people make sure you can convert and win at higher rates. And he was defining top sellers as people who had able to achieve a 35% win rate. And I was just thinking back to my conversation with Dave Brock on the show. Dave was on the first episode. Dave, top sales consultant,
Dave's
ran,
up.
ran teams for big companies. And his experience was similar to mine. Is I was managing teams at companies we were growing. 35% was the minimum in order for people to keep their jobs.
Yeah.
And now people are thinking 35% win rates. Well, that's a top seller. I'm like,
Yeah. That's amazing.
is it? Have we changed
think-
that much where I think that represents top performance?
Well, I was going to say, we've been in this period, certainly in the tech sector, where you didn't have to be that good to be successful. And that's all the bubble burst. And now people are learning in very hard lessons that you do need to be good and you do need to know what you're talking about and you do need to add value to your buyers. And so it's not surprising, but yeah, top sellers should have a much higher win rate than that.
What do you think, Matt?
I think, yes. What are we trying to aspire to, right? We should have better win rates. The question then becomes, well, why don't we? And there's greater headwinds. This business is not getting any easier for sure. But what are we doing to get better? What are we really doing to improve those win rates? What was the win rate last quarter, last year? And then why is it what it is? And what can we do to fix it? And how do we take steps to do that? So when the three of us got into this business, right, there was the 80-80 rule. 80% of the sellers made 80% or more of their number. And what's happened over the past 10 plus years is the investment in technology and tools to support sellers has increased exponentially. The investment in training, well, I think you said it was $15 billion. That number has gone up tremendously. And the incentives and the spiffs have gone up. Everybody's trying the best they can, but how are those aligned? How are those aligned to support the behavior that we want our sellers to embody on a daily basis, right? So it's so focused on getting the deal. And I've heard you talk about this, Andy, on several of your podcasts, sales acceleration and how that's a myth.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we do that? We sell by the end of the month and we'll give you this discount. And you said once, have you ever done the analysis on how many of those deals actually close? And the answer is obviously not, because I know that I've gone around the world asking that question. And if a sales team offers 10 different incentives, 10 deals, puts incentives out there to get those 10 deals closed in the month, on average, the self-reporting back is that maybe 2 of those 10 will close, which means that 8 don't. And those 8 go forward. And then what happens next month? We're negotiating off of the lower price.
Yes.
Right. So we've all been, and we're all doing it for trying to do the right reasons. But why is it? And it's, I think, partly because of the short-term pressures that CROs, sales leaders, frontline managers, and reps are under to get the deal, not focusing on doing the right behaviors consistently over time. That's hard.
Yeah. Lori, you're about to jump in.
No, I totally agree. It makes a lot of sense. And I still think it comes from the lack of the leadership vision, clear goals, and training and coaching for the frontline leadership, the managers. If that isn't done well, people are just doing the best they can, like Matt said, but that doesn't mean it's correct. It doesn't mean that it's going to lead to deal closure and to happy buyers.
Yeah, well, reflecting back on a point you talked about earlier, Lori, is and this is not a new issue, but it seems to be something that's been accentuated or amplified over the last 10, 15 years, is that, yeah, as a seller, you have to make a choice about where you invest your time.
Yeah.
And you've got a limited amount of time. So you have to be incredibly disciplined about who you're choosing to sell to. But this idea of choosing who you sell to seems foreign to a lot of sellers because they feel this pressure is, I got these opportunities, we have to sell to these opportunities, you don't get this 5x pipeline coverage requirement. When it should be, yeah, I'm going to sell to you, I'm not going to sell to you. Because you're just not a good enough fit. You're not, we can go through the reasons that we're going to disqualify you. And this, yeah, I was taught very early on by one particular manager is, don't think about qualifying prospects. Start with disqualifying them first, right? Get rid of the people you shouldn't be spending time with.
Yeah.
And you are making a choice who you want to sell to. And I talk about those as sellers. And I think it's such an important mindset to have, as so few are being sort of taught this, is that, yeah, I understand the pressures you feel. We all felt pressures as people who are individual self contributors to hit our numbers and so on and so forth. But ultimately, you have to control your time and control where you think you can succeed and the best path to doing that. And you shouldn't feel pressured into investing, let yourself feel pressured into investing your time into something that's just not a good fit.
Yeah.
A lot of sellers, especially younger, less experienced sellers coming into the business, don't know that they can select with whom they spend their time with versus not.
Right.
And they feel empowered when they go through training and they understand that they can, right? So you talk a lot about mindset, and really, how important is that? Right. So one of the phrases that rings loudly is that not everybody is qualified to be your customer, right? Not everybody, whatever company you work for, not every prospect is qualified to become a customer for a whole host of different reasons.
Right.
And the other one is that prospects buy for their reasons on their timelines. They buy for their reasons, not yours, right? And so if you think about like that, it really changes how we approach and engage with clients and how managers help coach their salespeople to work.
I think that sellers should look at this whole process of, who they decide they're going to sell to is like, I use this image in my first book, is you're the bouncer at the head of the velvet rope, letting
Right.
people into a club. And it's up to you. You decide who gets into your club, and not everybody gets into your club. And that's, as a seller, isn't it? You're listening to individual contributors. That's one way of taking control of how you sell, is making that decision about, this is
Very entrepreneurial.
entrepreneurial. And also, hey, we're trying to, as a salesperson, I look at things as every step I take, every interaction I have should be designed to increase the probability of me winning the deal. Right.
Right.
And that starts with choosing who it is you're going to sell to.
Well, going into the Wayback Machine,
Wayback Machine.
I was the bouncer at that club. And one of the things that we learned is one of the ways to get people to want to come into your club is to tell them that you can't just walk in. You have to wait to get into the club. And we would create this line. And then all of a sudden what happened is we were in downtown Boston. So the Patriots players or the Celtics players, right, they'd walk up and they're like, what's going on here? We want to get in. Well, there's a line. Well, here, can we get in? And maybe I don't want to divulge too much.
Here being money.
We're being recorded, but it ended up being a good entrepreneurial business. The club made its money. And we realized that being this broker to this exclusive place where people were waiting in line to get in had its privileges. But you don't just let anyone into the club.
Yeah, sellers, I think, especially again, if you're really focused on, hey, I want to win a greater fraction of my deals, learn how to do that consistently, because it is, to my mind, it's an experience has shown it's a ticket to more consistent success, selling bigger deals, ultimately perhaps earning more money, is sellers, you have to exercise some sort of control over how you spend your time. And until you establish that control, and again, it's a learning curve, admittedly, as we become more experienced, it becomes perhaps easier to do. But it does also put the onus on you to deliver,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Matt said my longtime saying, it has been never confuse sales activity with accomplishment, because
Right.
it's really easy to be busy and stay busy. And it's one other thing to be productive. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but maybe somebody that's listening will make them think that not everything you do is high value, and you need to focus on those high value things, like you said, Andy, that lead to moving your opportunity forward and ultimately bringing it to closure, or
Yeah.
not, one
Yeah.
or the other.
Does it make the possibility of winning higher? And example I like to give is I'm a huge soccer fan, right? And so one of the metrics that's used in soccer is they have this metric called the XG, the expected goal. And so what they do is they track every shot on goal that's made, the distance it's made from, the direction it's made for, was it kicked, was it headed, and there's these variables, and they track and assign a sort of score, a rating to it. But the idea being is that shots taken from a certain position on the field, left foot, right foot, whatever, has a certain expected goal value.
Right.
And so it drives sort of the formation the teams use and the strategies they employ to try to get the ball in a position where a player with a high expected goal average takes the shot, right? To maximize the possibility of scoring. Because it's a game where scoring's at a premium, just like in sales, when winning is at a premium.
Well, so Andy, isn't that sifting through the data, taking all that data that's out there, using the information to get some insight to create a competitive advantage, understanding where to shoot from, right? And that's huge.
Sure, based on the team you have, right? Yeah.
I was watching the basketball game, the Celtics game the other night with my daughter in Boston. And I said, I don't ever remember as a kid that they would shoot this many 3-pointers. And so I went into ChatGPT and said something like, is the number of 3-point shots more now than they were 20 years ago? And I got this list.
Absolutely. Yeah.
100%. And it's because they found with the data, with the ability to track these things, they recognized that if you shot more 3-pointers,
You'd make more.
You'd
make
win.
more of them.
You'd make more of them. And then, okay, now we have to recruit people.
You missed every shot you don't take.
Yeah, you miss 100% of right, all that. But that's really using the 5 to 8 or whatever the number is now, the proliferation of this technology stack to help managers and sellers like figure out like which shots to take and when, and which ones not to take, right? Kind of going back to the club analogy. We let people in the club that were always problems, and it was always a problem to get them out of the club to the point where, no, you can't come into the club anymore because you're a pain in the ass. You cause problems. You cause police to come here. Like, don't let those people in anymore. The data is very clear, right? So it's the same idea. We sellers, we take on clients just to get the deal that we're like, this is going to be a problem later. And I think more and more sales leaders are recognizing that the quality of the revenue is as or more important than the quantity of the revenue. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Not all revenue is equal. But I think you also balance that, though, with more and more companies hopefully are doing this, is understanding why the buyer bought, right? Because the data shows increasingly that the decisions that buyers are making, especially in crowded markets with a lot of competitors, really doesn't have anything to do with the product or the price, because they're virtually all the same. So what's the differentiation is what is the experience we had going through this process to make our decision? What was our experience with the seller? And
Still matters.
Well, not only matters, it's the single biggest individual factor in the buyer's decision. And they brought this up in the Challenger sale based on Gartner or CB research. How was that 12, 13 years ago when the book was published? And it's only become more so since then.
Yeah.
Andy, I've heard you talk in other podcasts about the reason why people buy, right? And I think Mark Magnaca call talked about it as the so what question. It was like, well, what's of all the things that's important, what's the one thing that's most important? I.e., why are you buying? And as we know, it's never price, although we're always made to feel that way. And I was at a Dell EMC event some years ago, and I was at Oracle, and the CIO of Dell EMC did a poll, and he was asking all of their clients, like, why did you buy? And the way he netted it out, he said, not one person said because of price. And a lot of the reasons in that business, right, at Dell EMC, storage and protection, he said people bought and invested with the company because they wanted to know if the stuff hit the proverbial fan, that they could call someone and they were going to get attention, like someone had their back. And that was way more important than getting the lowest price. Trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I think extending that a little bit forward in time or back in time is this idea. And I was talking to a customer last week about a customer of another company about how they made their decision. And for them, they kept coming back to is they were extrapolating based on their experience with the salesperson and the members of the sales team that they were dealing with. They were extrapolating from that what the experience would be like working with the company as a customer. And this is, I think, happens all the time, right? Is to your point, Matt, about price and product. They're making the decision based, like I said, on trust, as Lori said, is this experience. What's it say about the opportunity or what the opportunity will be like to work with this company? And it's, what are the personal connections, what are the relationships we built, the credibility, trust? Those are things that increasingly drive decisions when, I said, products are basically perceived to be, I wouldn't say commodities, but pretty interchangeable.
And those early impressions, right? That was the whole thing about having young SDRs in the role of the first contact to a higher level person, where, it wasn't a very good idea in a lot of cases. And in some, it worked out, but generally that whole role is being reevaluated.
Yeah. Well,
in the role of taking the least experienced people and having them do the most difficult job.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
But what could go wrong?
Right. But you think about it when, Matt, you were doing that, right? I was out making calls in the field when I was that age. And
yeah, me too.
And as I like to say, I was 21, I looked 12, and I was talking to people about changing their business and investing $100,000+, which in today's term was like $500,000. It's like, but I think the advantage I had compared to the young people that are doing the SDR job is they're just trying to do that one small thing, right? Whereas I had the chance to engage in a conversation beyond that.
Yeah.
Because, everybody's always in their beginning part of their sales career. You don't know anything. And believe me, I knew nothing, right? I knew nothing about really about business, knew nothing about sales. I said, I looked like a teenager. And yet, President's Club, my first year, but I think it's because I got more time with them, right? I asked questions. They knew I wasn't just trying to sell a meeting. I was there trying to engage with them. Yeah. And I found that as long as I was showing up authentically curious and continue to ask questions, that they gave me as much time as I wanted. I almost never had somebody cut me off. So I think SDRs are sort of a disadvantage because they've got this limited agenda. They don't get a chance to engage beyond.
And get a meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. What if that's it? You never get a chance to really, learn what it takes to go deeper.
Well, I'm sure both Andy and Lori, you've had people take you under their wing. And, and not just your managers, but like
customers.
Clients, your customers.
Oh, absolutely.
And so if you show up authentically, right? And I feel like I benefited. It made me think of something. I feel like I benefited from that as well, because I remember flying from Boston out to San Francisco, and that Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska was my territory. And I was in the investment business, and I would go into these office parks and just like knock on doors of Payne Weber and Smith Barney and Dean Witter, et cetera. And I was trying, and I think I was showing up authentically. I had no idea what I was doing, but I learned somehow how to build the relationships, and human beings ultimately want to help other human beings.
Yep.
And so they knew I didn't know anything, but if I was helping them out and I was giving my best, they would reciprocate. Most of the time, not all the time. I have some
No.
stories there. I'm sure we all do. But then on the flip side, success can be a poor teacher, where you go to President's Club your first year and you don't have the mentorship moving forward, and you think you're all that in the bag of chips.
Yeah.
It could go the other way.
It can. Yeah, if you're not keeping an open mind. But to your point, it's precisely right. I have sort of two customers in particular in the first few years of my career that did just what you said, just took me under their wings and basically taught me how to sell to them.
Yeah.
And you're never going to do that though. And this is leading to a different point, which is, I think, again, sort of focused on this whole idea of win rate. One of the things that came out of research that was done by this company, Trinity Perspectives in Australia, run by Kean McLaughlin, who both you may or may not know, tremendous amount of research into win-loss analyses. And one of the key reasons why, summarizing over thousands of interviews, why people buy and why they win, why they lose, is the connection, the relationships, the emotional connection you make with the buyers. So important. It's one of the critical reasons. There's so many people these days want to talk down the importance of that. And yet I think it's more important than ever. And yeah, especially if you're new and you learn that, get the experience, learn how to start building these types of connections with people. It pays itself back many times over.
I'll butcher the quote from Professor Deming from many years ago, prominent management consultant. And paraphrasing, he said, the problems that we all run into as sellers has almost nothing to do with the product and almost everything to do with the interactions between the buyer and the seller.
Yeah.
And I'll dig up the quote and send it to both of you, but
yeah,
that was 50, 60 years ago or more. It's still true today. But a lot of times today, as sellers, and again, we're all doing the best we can. I don't want to point fingers because, again, I've made all the mistakes, but they subscribe to the Arthur Red Motley school of selling, right? When quipped, he was famously quipped the 13 greatest words in sales: know your products, know your customers, call them incessantly, and ask them to buy. We call that spaghetti selling now.
Yes, spaghetti selling. Well, Deming has a great quote. Yeah, as we sort of circle back to win rates, is I liked W. Edwards Deming, I think his name was, one of the great business consultants. He said every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. And so when we're in these environments where sales teams have, let's say, the average that they found in the Franklin Covey research, 17%, or let's say you're a moderately higher, the 25% win rate as a team, we can say that, hey, there's individual sellers have a big role to play in that, but the system they're operating within is designed to yield low win rates.
Yeah.
And so you really have to be thinking about this. As a seller, you can sort of do what we talked about before, is you take control because we know you're in a system that's being designed to do something different. And you have to break out of that. But then also as managers, you have to think about it is that
right.
You've set it up. You've set it up to be a low win rate environment. What are you doing to change? And just one more thing, and I'll let you guys comment, is I remember speaking to the CRO of a publicly traded SaaS company. This was right before the pandemic at a conference, asking about their growth plans. And we had already had the conversation about their win rate. Their corporate win rate was like a 19% average win rate. And they're on surface very successful, publicly traded. It was like, so what are you doing what's your sales growth plan this year? It was all about more on the top of the funnel. And I was like, given your low win rate, wouldn't it be faster and less expensive, more sustainable way to grow to focus on increasing your win rates instead? Go from 19% this year to let's shoot for 23% this year. And the response was just silence, because it had never entered his thinking. That was what the approaches take to grow.
I probably didn't know how.
Possibly,
right?
But it just wasn't considered as part of the toolkit. And so I think this is sort of back to the Deming quote we've got, I know in certainly the SaaS world, all these consultants going around being paid tons of money that we're going to create your revenue architecture. And this is what we're going to do. And it's like, well, great, but it's yielding these low win rates. And who's really benefiting from that?
I'm just glad to hear Deming's name again because I haven't heard that for a long time.
Well,
He said some good stuff.
and James Clear, Atomic Habits, kind of piggybacked on that. I think his phrase was something along the lines of, you don't rise to the level of your talents, you fall to the level of your systems.
Yeah,
and
totally agree.
Yeah. I read a book on goal setting toward the end of the year. And at the end of it, it had these top 7 things you need to do when hitting your goals. And one of them was, the last one was, don't lose. I was like, what? What do you mean? And then I read it and I was like, this is stupid. And then I read it. I was out for a walk and I'm like, wait a minute. That's my problem. I can't find where are my notes? Where did I put them? Where did I
time wise, right?
I had this great idea. Like, and I wrote it down. Where did I put it? Where's that sticky? Where's that thing in my pocket? And it's like, don't lose stuff. Like, have a system for whatever it is that's important to you. And it's just, it dawned on me that sometimes these things that come off as silly are actually very impactful, or can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but Clear, I think, one of his great quotes from his book is every action, again, paraphrase it, but every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become.
Yes.
Mm.
And in my last book, I sort of changed the wording a bit and said every action you take is a vote for the type of seller you want to become. And so if you want to get better, if you want to increase your win rates, if you want to have, a sustainable career and a growing career, then you have to be very intentional about everything you do being geared towards helping your buyers make progress toward making their decision. So you have to be conscious of what's the experience the buyer's having with you. And it gets to what Clear said, it gets to what Deming said. What's your personal process? Is your personal process yielding the results that you want it to yield? Because at the end of the day, it's up to you. Yeah, your boss can tell you what to do, and they obviously do. But in my own career, I sort of had to forge my own path. Not that I was disruptive, so on. But I think if there are 5 million salespeople in the world, there are 5 million unique ways of selling. And really the job of managers is to help people become, as you said before, Matt, to become the best version of themselves.
In the context, I think what we're all saying, though, is within the context of a team, within the context of a system where,
sure,
right, it's not having robots. I know you've talked about this, right? The human approach to stuff. It's not trying to clone people, but it is getting more people to do more of the right things at the right time more often, right?
Yeah, like parameters, right?
Yeah. Language, value system, goals.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think part of it comes too, and the sort of beginning to run a little short on time here, but I just want to bring up, I'm interested in your take on this, because you had somebody ask me, said, well, gosh, you write and talk so much about the human first approach to selling and the power of that. And yet we talk about winning a lot. And is that sort of, antithetical to some degree? And I think it's because sellers don't really understand why winning is important. I think about, why are people in sales, right? We know why people say they go into sales in the first place, which, we want to make money and so on. But for people that have been in sales and trying to make it a career, the research has been pretty clear that it's not the money. There's fulfillment that comes from the job that you do, from helping your buyers achieve certain things that are important to them. And you can't help your buyer if you don't win their business. And that's where this becomes so important. Is, if we want the fulfillment in our career, we're never getting that fulfillment if we don't learn how to create the experiences that enable us to win our customers' business.
And if we assume that by winning their business, we're helping them,
Yes.
That's where it's got to be both. So you have to represent products and services that can do that. And it's amazing.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Well,
But
that's part of, for sellers, is being in control of their situation. I'll call it as a gentleman that Brandon Fluharty. He's been on the show. He's been on other shows, and somebody I've mentored a bit. And he writes a lot about how to close. And he's a hugely talented individual. Writes close big deals. Writes about winning big deals. But he agrees, and he and I talk about it. Is you have to be able to put yourself in the right situation.
Yeah.
To do that.
And that's up to you also.
That's up to you.
That's your choice, not anybody around you. Yeah.
Right. But ultimately, it should be in sales. When you're thinking about it, the importance of winning is not earning money. It's this fulfillment from helping other people. This is the connection. And this is what you want to aspire to.
Dan Pink talks about that right way back, book Drive, right? Autonomy, mastery, purpose. Why are you in sales? Why you're in sales might be different than why Lori's in sales, versus me. And then how do you advance that? Like, because that's what gets people out and gets people to bed in the morning.
But I think it's the deeper you go into your career in sales, it's the purpose more than anything else. It's the animating thing that keeps you coming back. At least for me is, I've been very fortunate in my career. I've made good money, have a great life, but I was never really thinking about the money. I was thinking about what I was trying to achieve for somebody or work with somebody. Because I knew in the back of my mind, if I could achieve that, the rewards come.
Yeah.
But I think what keeps people in the job is this purpose, is the fulfillment. And again, you're never going to experience that unless you put yourself in a position to help your buyers, and you help your buyers by winning their business.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
So Andy.
Yes.
So being that authentic self, think about that as a question. Is that a question? Or is that, if I'm a seller and I'm working with you and we're in a sales cycle and we're at the later stages and you say something like, well, why you, or how can you help me? And I say, Andy, I know we can help you. The question is, do you believe it? The reality is, I can't help you unless you select us. I can't help you unless you work with us. And I shut up. How does that? Is that bad?
Well, I think that the buyers make that why you decision much sooner than that, right?
Yeah.
Because the buyers are making the decision whether they're going to invest their time in you, right, as opposed to somebody else. And that why you question, which I wrote about in my last book, is they're going to answer that through how they're experiencing you, and they'll become more confirmed in that opinion as you go further into the buying journey. But they make that first cut pretty early on. It's been my experience.
Well, that's why the saying deals don't fall apart at the end. That's just when the seller finds out about it.
That's exactly.
Deals don't fall apart at the end of the month order. That's just when you're notified.
So it's just when you notify. It's so true. It's such a great
That's
saying.
great.
Well, but it's so true. And when you're newer in the business, and unfortunately, some people hold on to this too long, but they tend to think is like, well, the buyer's talking to 3 vendors and we're all being treated equally, right? We're all being given the same amount of time. We're all being given the same amount of attention. And it's like, no, buyer oftentimes that first impression is like, yeah, I like these people. Yeah, they're going to get preferential treatment. And that's why this whole idea of, to your point, Lori, you made us, first impressions are so critical. And how you build these initial connections with buyers is, and I think a point you were talking about earlier, Matt, is buyers become fans, quote unquote fans, of certain salespeople. They become supporters of them. And they want to see certain salespeople do a good job. They're not going to make a bad decision just to necessarily help a salesperson, but they have a rooting interest in certain sellers.
I think of that as a consumer. Absolutely. There's
Yeah.
certain people that are just so sharp and they get it. They hear you. They reflect it back. And it's like, I love this person. And
Right.
I'm going to buy something from them.
Yeah.
You
Assuming
go to a restaurant and
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're getting upsold on like the wine or the whatever. And
chocolate
because they're-
souffle.
because they, oh, hey, can I have everyone's attention? Can I tell you about the menu? And they create some exclusivity. Oh, if you want that dessert, you're going to have to order it now because this takes a while. 'cause
Limited.
it's only a few
Limited
left.
supply. Yeah, we've only got 2 more
Secret.
left. You might want to order that now before just letting you know. Yeah.
You're looking at that. Let me double check it. Let's see if we have any left. I'll be right back.
Yeah. And that works in B2B, that transcends it into B2B because we're human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because we're humans, right?
Also,
I mean, it's like, go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. So, Lori, how do we amplify? I thought you were going in a different direction. You talked about that experience there, but what about, do we do anything anymore without checking the reviews? No one goes anywhere. No one buys anything anymore without checking to see what other people have to say. And so you talk about about fans of salespeople. How do you make that focus on creating those raving fans that will tell other people? Because think about the power that has in our world today.
So you were saying, how do we serve? Because you froze a little bit on the in the talk. So how do we sort of get this rating of sellers, if you will, out there, reviews of sellers? So,
well, just referrals and introductions and things like
Sure.
that. Like just expanding on what you're saying about creating those fans and having those experiences. And
yeah,
hey, you might like working with this person or with this company because we loved it.
yep, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's, as a seller, you should be mindful of the fact that just as part of your career, but in any, again, environment you're with, that is, I know there were several times I think I won pretty sizable deals based on who I was, right? A team is part of it. No one wins a deal alone, but the point person for it, yeah, they sort of wanted me to win. Because to Lori's point, I made them feel heard. I made them feel understood. I made them feel like we had really listened and we really knew what was most important to them, what they were trying to get out of the deal we were working on. Yeah. That
Maya
brought
Angelou
joy.
effect.
Yeah. Yeah. Not how you make them feel, right? Exactly. All right. Well, gosh, this has been great. We went on a long time. Really appreciate you guys sticking around and doing this. So,
Wow.
Lori, tell us how people can connect with you and learn more about Score More Sales, Women Sales Pros, buy your book, all those things.
So I'm on LinkedIn, Lori Richardson, look up Score More Sales. The book looks like this on Amazon. She sells the green one. And at Score More Sales, at Women Sales Pros, I'm all over the place. So I'd love to engage with anyone that listen, and make sure you say that you listened because that's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Let her know where you heard. And Matt.
Well, my son's graduating from the University of Colorado next week. So to borrow a phrase from their new coach, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, I ain't hard to find.
Is he entering the transfer portal?
So on LinkedIn and our website, www.coachem.io. And we're on Twitter at MD Benelli and at CoachEm now.
Got it.
Engage.
Excellent. Well, thank you both very much. And look forward to having you back. This was great.